So let's dive right in, right? We're talking about RPA and some of its impact in different areas. There's all sorts of forecasts and prognostications as to the growth of RPA. So what is Forrester's position on that?
Well, it's a good question because there's a tendency for analysts to be too bullish on markets. You know, if there's nothing changing or accelerating, there's very little of interest to write about, right? So we have that tendency overall. I'd have to say, though, for the robotic process automation market, it's actually exceeding our forecast rates. We had a model that was based on cubicle workers, and RPA at its core really targets back office and call center employees and lifts low-value hours out of those employees. And we estimated there'd be about 4 million cubicles emptied out over 5 years. And then it's pretty easy from there to calculate the cost of the automations and come up with a market figure, which for us was around $2.8 billion.
So clearly bullish, and plenty of growth, right? I guess both locally and abroad, you see, the U.S. and
yes, worldwide, yes.
Okay. Super. Another question we're quite often asked, I'm curious how you weigh in on this, and that is, kind of comparing and contrasting RPA versus BPM.
BPM, of course, has been an established market for decades. And was really, these platforms are designed to really blow up a process and redesign it, to modernize it, right? So they look at the end-to-end process. And the idea is that you look at the as-is process and you envision how it should be, and then you use the software from the platform to design and configure the new process, with the idea that you'll continuously change and improve over time. So RPA doesn't do any of that. It's not built for continuous improvement. It's built with the assumption that you're going to leave all of the back-end systems and core systems alone. You're really going to take these bots and you're going to plug gaps in them, but leave the existing process largely alone. You're just going to mimic the behavior of a human with a bot who's doing something that might be low value add. And you'll replace that with the software, but not have to change a lot. So they're very different. I like to explain it this way. If you've seen a business process management process map, which has the fully articulated process, and you see humans that are working off cues in that process, the bots are really just replacing those humans that are working off cues under the broader management of the BPM platform. Now, having said that, technology being what it is and markets being what they are, the BPM players are looking at how do they augment their capabilities with robotics, and the RPA platforms are looking at how do they extend what they do to get to the overall process. And that's where you see a lot of interest in process mining and other integration points for the bots.
No, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And so if you think about our membership at ARPA AI, we have a little over 16,000 members. And there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice that network. The simplest way that I do it is to break it into two categories. There are starters and scalers. And it's interesting to see where companies start, and then from there, once they have some success, where they scale. What is your sense as to where companies are starting? What are you seeing out there? And as to processes, right? Where are they starting, low-hanging fruit, and where do you see them scaling to?
So I have a very simple heuristic for this, and I call it the rule of fives. This is where companies are starting. They're starting on processes that meet this rule of five criteria. 5 decisions or less. The decisions for RPA, as opposed to BPM, are coded into the script, the bot script. There's no real rules management as you have in a BPM platform or a rules engine, or maybe an AI-based decision management environment. So when you get beyond 5 decisions, then the bots become difficult to maintain. So keep the decisions to 5 or less. Keep the number of apps involved. Usually RPA is considered a swivel chair application because it's switching among applications as a human would, right? But again, if you exceed 5 applications, then the probability of one of those applications changing and needing and affecting bot performance becomes higher and higher and higher as you get more and more apps involved. So keep that. And the third one is less than 500 clicks. This is the activity of a human And the reason that's important is because when you get beyond a certain number, then you're probably going into an exception path, which becomes harder to structure. Now, one last point on the rule of 5, which is a little confusing, I admit, because there are only 3 rules, but they have 5s in them. So it's the rule of 5, right? So that's confused some people, which again, we like confusion. Right? But if you can find the rule of 5 processes in high volume, that's where RPA gold is today. So that's where companies are starting out. The concern is that where do they go beyond that? And that leads into a discussion of analytics.
Okay, but if you could, how do we translate that into, let's say, real use cases? In other words, are you seeing a lot of back office finance, HR, call center? Where are you, in the broader sense, where are you kind of seeing at least the low-hanging fruit for many of these companies?
The starting point for RPA is very much in what you could call the business shared services, finance and accounting and HR, and in supply chain and sourcing and procurement. These, unfortunately, for a lot of companies, are the least attended to systems, the underlying core systems. So they might be older versions of SAP or Oracle, so forth. So there are a lot of inefficiencies that are created there. They're not the systems that generate revenue, which might get a little more attention. You know, you're trying to, improve a system to compete with Amazon.
Right.
So there are lots of inefficiency gaps there. So that's where you have a lot of rule of 5 type applications. In those areas. Finance and accounting is probably number 1. I'd say HR is number 2. And now we're seeing in the second and third phase of the RPA market much more attention to the line of business applications like claims processing and so forth. But it's really the business shared services.
And then just related to that, what has been your experience as to just overall receptivity? Right? Because as you and I know, somebody in an organization has an idea, or they're playing golf with the CFO, or they meet with you and they get an idea and they go back, and not everybody suddenly does a group high five, right?
Yeah, there are lots of interesting organizational conflicts. There are conflicts within the technology groups. For example, those that have built a career around BPM understanding, and now they see that the business savings they've been projecting for the BPM projects that's now taken 4 years to do, they're getting gobbled up by the RPA that's come swooping in and nailing those business savings more quickly. So there's tension at the technology level. There's tension because the RPA movement is really being driven by the business. It's being driven by your accounts payable manager, your CFO, your HR manager, your line of business manager. So the technology management groups are really caught a little bit off guard. And they're seeing rightly that there are scale problems and there are security issues that are raised, new ones that are raised by this type of technology. So there's a lot of, I probably spend half my time talking about advising on operating models for RPA.
No, good point. So we all spend a lot of time speaking about RPA, what it is and what it does. However, I've referred to RPA as kind of a digital gateway drug, right? It's kind of where a lot of these companies start.
I like that.
But then at some point, usually a year and a half later, looking for something more powerful. I've been personally intrigued by platforms that either are AI fueled or are AI ready. So this way, it anticipates that next step. What's your position?
That's and getting back to the question on meeting the market forecast. One of the important assumptions of our model that again gets to that 2.8 billion is that the bots get more intelligent over time. If they stay looking for just those rule of 5 applications, the market doesn't get to 2.8 billion. So it has to become more intelligent. And we just did a survey to companies and looked at where are they, where is the combination of AI and RPA showing the most value today? Because that's the trajectory. And of course, AI is 15 or 20 different building blocks, right? So the areas that came out number 1, the headline was, which surprised me a little bit, because I really thought that RPA and chatbots were a great combination. The natural language processing that allows a employee to interact with a chatbot and then have the RPA bots in the background doing really cool things for them, right? Or customer service, where you're coming in via chatbot, Facebook Messenger or some chatbot, and you're having the RPA bots fulfill an order or to do something clever. It turns out they were 2 and 3. Number 1 was text analytics, going after documents, going after emails, and using the text analytics to organize data and information in a format that the RPA bots could handle, which has to be structured. The RPA does not handle and operate on
Unstructured,
content directly, right? So that's really, it's done two things. It's raised the excitement around the text analytics market, which has been kind of quiet. And the combination is raising the value of RPA in the minds of many of our clients. Yeah.
No, super. So let me draw you toward a couple of questions that are, let's say, vertically centric, right? Industries.
Yeah.
I have a couple of notes I want to ask you. First is insurance, right? So are you seeing anything exciting happening in the insurance area with regard to, let's say, claim settlement and RPA's impact on accuracy?
Yes, all across the 5 insurance areas that we cover, which of course is commercial insurance and property and casualty and health insurance and so forth. There are 5 different areas of insurance, and they're all quite a bit different at some level. But claims is fundamental to all of them. And that's essentially what the goal of insurance is. One could say to avoid claims, but there's lots of need to access core systems in processing a claim. The core information about the so for example, before you pay a claim, you have to understand whether the premiums have been paid up. Well, that's a human check today. RPA bots can go in and check that, right? And just put that request in a queue that then can be processed for the next step of claims. To be able to organize the claiming reporting that goes to the client, right? So you have to go in and maybe pull together different clauses of different claim documents and pull them into one that explains why you're not paying for that hurricane damage.
Right.
So lots of insurance is a really ripe area for RPA in general.
Super. And you have high volume, right? So that's optimal, right?
Well, in P&C, property and casualty, it's all about volume. In commercial insurance, it's more about value.
And you also touched on the benefits of what I would say digital labor on analytics, and then how analytics could drive reporting, certainly in a regulated arena. Right. So you have those benefits.
You have those benefits as well. I really like the case of forms coming in from on a claim that are errors can be checked with the combination of text analytics that's extracting the elements from the form, correlating them. So if someone said married here and single here, it can be found at the front of the process rather than going into the back office where it's many more times expensive. So the RPA bot can, based on that information from the text analytics, can then fire off a notification to the advisor, to the customer directly, and can basically get the error fixed at the front end of the process. Another good application.
Yep. Does this mean my insurance rates go down?
No.
Yeah, good luck, right?
I'm sorry,
okay,
no.
Just an idea.
Yeah.
So let's switch over to telecom.
Yeah, telecom.
You see anything good happening with, frustration around average hold time?
Yeah, well, there's way too much average hold time, as we know. The interesting thing in telecom, is there's still lots of things that an agent does that are just a bot can do. A large telco in APAC, for example, has 40,000 agents, and they have 6 different versions of Siebel. And when an address change comes in, the agents before the bots, had to go and make those changes themselves. Right. That's a significant amount of sunk time. Knowing what the status of an order is, of a repair, of a service, would often be hold time or a call back, which is expensive. The focus is always on hold time, but it's calling back's expensive too. So having the bot go off and figure out where that is by going into the various systems underneath that might have that information and pooling it in a way that the agent can see quite readily is a great application. So lots to do in telecommunications.
Okay, so more good news for us as consumers, right?
Consumers.
People waiting on hold.
Yeah.
And
why not have the bot validate you as a customer rather than go through these silly questions that they ask you?
Oh my goodness.
Bots are doing that in some environments now. They're going in and vetting you as the person you say you are.
Right.
For example.
Yeah, so that eliminates a little bit more pain there, right?
Yes,
so,
and also reduces the average call time, which is the other key metric in the agent world. It's hold time for the customer experience, but it's for cost for the call center, contact center. It's about the actual call time, so you can reduce that.
And then one more vertical I want to touch on is retail. Is there anything magical happening in the retail sector?
Well, yeah, retail's very interesting. The biggest HR bot deployments have been in retail for example, pharmacy chains that have thousands of employees, and they have very short tenures, right? So high turnover environments. The HR group, when you analyze it, is spending most of its time doing simple math and transactions and calculations, calculating the average leave time, the benefit times, the movement from an intern to a full-time employee. These are all simple mathematical calculations that the bots can do. What does that do for that HR environment? It allows those people to think about talent management and retention and other things that are more strategic, performance management, rather than doing calculations that a bot can do. So we're seeing that. And then if you look on the floor, you know, it's very hot today in New York, right? It's a record 90, 95 degrees. You know, there probably are stores all over New York that are ordering more water. Right?
Oh, very interesting.
So you're on the floor, you're ordering more water. Well, that's out of the normal supply chain delivery. That's going to require putting a lot of data into your underlying ERP system. The bot can do that, right? The bot can take the fact that there's been an order and then handle all of the back end data entry so that it's recorded properly in the supply chain.
Great.
You know, there are just many use cases for this technology.
Plenty of opportunities in retail.
Plenty of opportunities.
And I would say retail industry in many cases is looking for some relief, right? Some efficiencies.
Well, of course, they're very challenged, right? So if you're you know, being Amazoned, you know, you're looking at ways you have to cut costs, and you got to step up your game in supply chain, right? You have to you know, you have to start to try to compete with the order and the fulfillment and the smoothness that is being experienced by the Walmarts of the world and the Amazons of the world. So it's a great way to do that more simply without a lot of tremendous modernization programs to use these bots to accelerate the delivery management.
So, and Craig, if I think about, you know, what you do every day, what I do every day, everywhere we look, 360 degrees, somebody's doing something. You're talking about RPA, intelligent automation, AI. However, it still surprises me that there are many, many thousands of companies and or at least managers within companies that haven't started yet. So with the few minutes we have left, what is your advice to either a tech leader or a business leader in an organization who's looking around and seeing that this is going on, maybe is still questioning? What's your advice to them? Well,
you know, I think that there's obviously use cases that many are finding valuable for this technology. That's why the market is surging the way it is. And you know, you need to start a assessment program in your environment, and maybe you need some outside help to do that. There are partners like Infosys and others that you may have that can come in and help you identify those first 5 applications that meet the rule of 5.
Right.
You know, and then you know, POCs are very popular with this, and often the partner can host the RPA platform for you. So you don't have to commit to a platform. You can, or the project, you can see whether it works. So POCs are really very popular, and you know, I think if you look at the overall spectrum of maturity of this market, I'd say, you know, easily, you know, 20%, 30% of companies are in that stage 1, 2, 3 of POC early pilots. You know, and it's really only 5% that have a full-blown operating model for the automation. You're seeing the same thing.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So hence the growth going forward, right?
Exactly.
A lot of people just starting out.
Exactly.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me on.
Today.
It's great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
So Craig, what are you seeing out there in the industry with all that's going on? What kind of headwinds are you seeing?
Yeah, well, the headwinds are, I'd really say there are 4 that really could stall or slow the progression of this market. You know, the first is around compliance and governance. You know, this digital workforce, as we now talk about it, you know, these are bots that have human credentials, and they're operating in the most trusted application boundaries that a company has. These are the core systems. This is where all the good stuff is. So you have to be very, we haven't quite developed the way to explain this to compliance yet in terms of when you try to and say, well, there's this virtual machine that has 5 or 6 bot software components in it, and they're going to be taking over these 30 or 100 desktops in different ways, and some are multi-threaded and some, that doesn't work. They have built a structured way to explain their systems to external auditors and to do compliance reporting. So there is a walking up the mountain for this technology that's there, and legitimate security issues. You have to have repositories that carefully manage these credentials, credential vaults they're called. You have to have very, very strict controls so that your virtual machine, your VDI administrator is not seeing the customer data and violating GDPR. So there's a whole category around security and compliance that I think is a headwind that has to be solved. Around control, all of the platforms have control towers that allow you, visibility. That's really what jettisoned this market. We've been building macros for a long time. One of the things that really, helped the market evolve was the ability to centrally manage them. They used to be just on the desktop, right? So, but having said that, the central management of these things is really in its infancy. If you're trying to set up a separate management area just for HR and one for finance and accounting, a lot of providers don't do multi-tenancy that allow you to do that very, very well. It's also, you need more real-time, because these bots are in the middle of your transactions that generate revenue, you need more real-time reporting. So all of that is in its early stages of being really rolled out. So when you talk about scale, we have some work to do to really get there. Another, probably the biggest one right now is assessment. After these rule of 5 applications are found and exercised, the question is, where do you go from there? What is the roadmap? And most companies don't have a good way to say, this process, this really works for RPA. And they may look at a process and try to apply RPA to it when really it's more of a BPM platform play. So we need to get the rules around assessment. And the fourth thing is just overall operating models in general. Because of the federated nature of this, in other words, the human worker is on the business side, so the building and the design of the digital worker should really be with the business as well, in our opinion. Okay, so the design studios that are with these platforms are not quite there yet to allow a business person really do that design. And when they're done, it's not very clear what the process is that's in the bot that now was previously in the head of the human. Right. So there's a governance issue around that too. So the design capabilities to align with the federation of the technology isn't there yet. So we have to really accelerate those 4 things. And if we do, I think it'll continue on the trajectory that we've anticipated.
Okay, so clearly strong headwinds, but few speed bumps on the way. We can agree.
I would call them speed bumps.
Okay, super. Great. Craig, thanks
or
again.
Traffic tickets.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, either way. Craig, thanks again. I appreciate you coming down to New York here to meet with us.
My pleasure. Anytime.